9-year-old Zara Rahman lives above her family's restaurant in Bangkok, where being Muslim means staying invisible. When Thailand's most powerful Buddhist master dismisses her faith at a public forum, she asks him one devastating question that goes viral and changes everything. A moment of childhood courage becomes a revolution that threatens her family's survival while transforming a spiritual master's soul. Part 1. The Unlikely Voice. The monastery bells had just finished their evening chant when 9-year-old Zara walked into the most important debate of her life. She didn't know it yet, but in less than 10 minutes, her quiet voice would shatter the confidence of Thailand's most revered Buddhist master and change both their destinies forever. The Bangkok Cultural Center buzzed with anticipation. Cameras rolled, social media live-streamed, and over 800 people filled every seat to witness Master Thanakit, the enlightened voice of Southeast Asia, defend traditional Buddhism against what he called foreign faiths that cage the human spirit. But as Zara clutched her mother's hand, watching the orange-robed figure on stage dismiss her religion with elegant cruelty, something stirred in her chest. The same warmth she felt during prayer, the same certainty that had guided her through memorizing the Quran in 3 languages. In the heart of Bangkok's bustling Sukhumvit district, where golden temple spires pierced the smoggy skyline and street vendors sold everything from mango sticky rice to iPhone cases, lived a family that didn't quite fit the usual patterns. Zara Rahman lived with her parents in a modest apartment above a halal restaurant, her world shaped by 2 cultures that had found harmony in the most unexpected way. Her father, Omar, was a Palestinian refugee who had fled to Thailand 15 years ago. Her mother, Siraporn, was a Thai woman who had converted to Islam after falling in love, not just with Omar, but with the peace she found in the faith's teachings. Together, they had created something beautiful, a home where Arabic prayers mixed with Thai lullabies, where Zara could recite verses from the Quran as fluently as she could order pad Thai from the vendor downstairs. Zara wasn't like other children her age. While her classmates played video games, she studied Islamic jurisprudence. While they watched cartoons, she debated theology with her father. At 9 years old, she'd already memorized 12 chapters of the Quran and could explain the pillars of Islam in Thai, Arabic, and English. "She has an old soul," Siraporn often told her friends. "Sometimes I think Allah put wisdom in her that took me 30 years to find." The evening that would change everything began like any other. Omar had seen an advertisement for the Great Interfaith Dialogue at the Bangkok Cultural Center. Master Thanakit, Thailand's most famous Buddhist monk, would be speaking about liberation from religious dogma. The event promised to be civilized, intellectual, a chance for different faiths to engage respectfully. "It might be good for Zara to see how different people think," Omar had told his wife. "Even if we disagree, we can learn something." How wrong he was. The cultural center was packed beyond capacity. Thailand's elite mingled with curious students, foreign diplomats, and live-streaming influencers. The air hummed with excited chatter in multiple languages. Master Thanakit commanded the stage like a king holding court, his saffron robes pristine, his silver hair gleaming under the professional lighting. For 45 minutes, he spoke eloquently about the beauty of Buddhism's pathless path. His voice was hypnotic, his arguments sophisticated. The audience hung on every word as he painted a picture of spiritual freedom that transcended rules, regulations, and, though he never said it directly, the primitive demands of Abrahamic faiths. "True enlightenment," he declared, his eyes sweeping the crowd, "comes not from following external commands, but from discovering the emptiness within. Why bind yourself to laws written by ancient men when you can find liberation in the infinite space of your own consciousness?" The applause was thunderous. Camera phones captured every moment for social media. This was exactly the kind of content that went viral. A wise master sharing profound truths with elegant authority. But in the third row, a small hand gripped a mother's fingers so tightly that Siraporn looked down in concern. "Zara, are you okay?" The little girl's eyes were fixed on the stage, her jaw set in a way that reminded Siraporn of her husband when he was about to make a point. "He's talking about Islam, isn't he, Mama? Even though he won't say it." Siraporn's heart sank. She had hoped Zara was too young to catch the subtle implications, but her daughter was too intelligent for such merciful ignorance. "What do you want to do?" Siraporn whispered. Master Thanakit was now taking questions from the audience. Hands shot up across the room. Professors, graduate students, journalists eager for quotes. He answered each with practiced wisdom, his responses polished by decades of public speaking. Any religion that claims to have the final truth, he said in response to one question, is already demonstrating its limitation. How can the infinite be contained in finite rules? More applause, more camera phones, more nods of approval from an audience that felt intellectually superior for consuming such refined spiritual content. Zara's hand trembled as she raised it. At first, no one noticed. She was too small, hidden behind the adults in front of her, but she stood up, her tiny frame barely visible, and kept her hand raised with quiet persistence. The moderator spotted her eventually and seemed amused. Well, we have a young questioner. What's your name, dear? Every camera in the room turned toward her. The live stream chat exploded with curiosity. A child in a hijab at a Buddhist philosophy lecture. This was definitely going to be interesting content. Zara walked to the microphone with careful steps, her small hands clasped in front of her. The room fell silent. 800 people suddenly aware they were about to witness something unexpected. Master Thanakit smiled indulgently, the way adults do when children try to join grown-up conversations. He had no idea he was looking at his own undoing. "My name is Zara," she said clearly into the microphone, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "I am 9 years old, and I am Muslim." The words hung in the air like a challenge no one had expected. "I have a question for Master Thanakit." She paused, and in that pause, something shifted. The master's indulgent smile faded slightly. The audience leaned forward. The camera zoomed closer. "You say that following rules makes us prisoners, but..." She tilted her head slightly, exactly the way she did when questioning her father's explanations of complex theology. If someone wants to hurt another person, shouldn't there be a rule against that? The question was so simple, so obvious, that it caught everyone off guard. Master Thanakit blinked, clearly not expecting to engage in actual philosophical debate with a child. "Well, of course violence is wrong," he said, his tone still patronizing. But that's still a rule," Zara interrupted gently. "A rule that protects people. So maybe some rules aren't prisons. Maybe they're..." She searched for the right word. "Like safety nets?" A murmur rippled through the audience. On the live stream, comments began flooding in from viewers who hadn't expected a 9-year-old to corner one of Asia's most respected spiritual leaders with such simple logic. Master Thanakit's composure cracked slightly. "Rules about not harming others are natural, child. They arise from wisdom, not from..." He caught himself before saying primitive scriptures, but everyone knew where the sentence was heading. Zara nodded seriously. "In Islam, we have a rule too. We call it mercy. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said that Allah will not show mercy to those who do not show mercy to others." She looked directly at the master, her young eyes holding a depth that made several audience members shift uncomfortably. "Isn't that the same wisdom you're talking about? Just written down so we don't forget?" The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't the respectful quiet of an audience listening to a master's teachings. It was the stunned silence of people realizing they were watching a child dismantle 40 years of carefully constructed philosophy with questions so honest they couldn't be dismissed. Master Thanakit opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. And in that moment of hesitation, Zara did something that would be replayed millions of times across social media platforms in 6 languages. She smiled, not triumphantly, not smugly, but with the genuine warmth of a child who had just shared something beautiful and wanted the grown-ups to understand it too. "I think," she said softly, "that maybe you and I want the same thing. We both want people to be good to each other. Maybe we just have different ways of remembering how..." The explosion of noise that followed, gasps, applause, heated discussions, barely registered with Omar and Siraporn, who sat frozen in their seats, watching their 9-year-old daughter walk calmly back to them while 800 adults processed what had just happened. But they weren't thinking about the audience or the cameras or the viral video that was already being uploaded to TikTok with the caption, "Buddhist master destroyed by 9-year-old Muslim girl." They were thinking about what came next. Because in Thailand, as in many places, making a powerful man look foolish in public, especially a man revered by millions, rarely ended with applause. As the evening's event concluded in chaos, with reporters rushing to interview Zara and Master Thanakit leaving through a side exit without speaking to anyone, Omar Rahman held his daughter's hand and wondered if her moment of courage had just put their family in more danger than a 9-year-old should ever have to face. The real test, he knew, was just beginning. Part 2. The Storm Awakens. The video went viral at 3:47 a.m. Bangkok time. Zara was sleeping peacefully, her Quran resting on the nightstand beside her bed, when her father's phone began buzzing with notifications that wouldn't stop. By dawn, #Zarav's master was trending across Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. By noon, international news outlets were calling. Buddhist master humbled by 9-year-old Muslim girl. Child prodigy exposes religious hypocrisy in viral debate. The little voice that shook Thailand's spiritual elite. The headlines multiplied faster than Omar could read them. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, everyone wanted the story. The video had been viewed 2.3 million times on TikTok, shared 800,000 times on Facebook, and spawned thousands of reaction videos across YouTube. But with viral fame came something the Rahman family hadn't expected: consequences. The first sign of trouble arrived with the morning's rice delivery. Mrs. Pensri, who had supplied their halal restaurant for 3 years, stood at the door with an apologetic expression and a truck full of rice she wouldn't unload. "I'm sorry, Omar," she said, not meeting his eyes. "My husband says it's better if we don't do business anymore, just for a while, until things calm down." Omar stared at her, confused. "What things? What happened?" Mrs. Pensri glanced nervously at her phone. "You haven't seen the other videos?" Within an hour, Omar understood. The counter-narrative had begun. Master Thanakit's supporters weren't taking their revered teacher's public embarrassment quietly. Videos started appearing with titles like "Foreign Family Disrespects Thai Culture" and "Islamic Infiltration of Buddhist Thailand." Social media influencers with hundreds of thousands of followers posted reaction videos condemning the disrespectful child who attacked our spiritual heritage. The comment sections were brutal. "Send them back where they came from. This is what happens when we let foreigners practice their religion here." That little girl was coached to embarrass Master Thanakit, fake Muslims using a child for propaganda. By evening, 3 more suppliers had canceled their contracts. The halal restaurant downstairs, their family's main source of income, saw its first empty day in 5 years. Zara, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the storm brewing around her. She spent the morning reading, practicing her Arabic calligraphy, and asking her mother if she could visit the mosque to thank Allah for giving her the courage to speak. "Mama," she said over lunch, "why do people think I was disrespectful? I said please and thank you. I didn't interrupt. I just asked questions." Siraporn exchanged a worried glance with her husband. "How do you explain to a 9-year-old that sometimes speaking truth makes people angry precisely because it is true?" "Some people," Siraporn said carefully, "don't like to have their ideas questioned, even when the questions are good ones." "But questioning is how we learn," Zara said, confused. "That's what Baba taught me." Omar reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. "You did nothing wrong, Habibti. Sometimes doing the right thing has a price. That doesn't make it wrong." But even as he spoke the words, Omar wondered if he believed them. Was his daughter's moment of courage worth what it might cost their family? The answer came sooner than expected. That afternoon, while Omar was at the mosque for ASR prayer, 2 men in dark suits visited the restaurant. They spoke to Siraporn in formal Thai, showing identification that made her hands shake. "Immigration enforcement," the older man said. "We need to speak with your husband about his residency documentation." "His papers are all legal," Siraporn said, but her voice wavered. "He's been here 15 years. We're married. Everything is proper." "Nevertheless," the man replied, "there have been concerns raised about the family's activities. Your husband needs to report to the immigration office tomorrow morning." After they left, Siraporn sat in the empty restaurant and cried for the first time since Zara was born. Not because she was afraid for herself, but because she could see the pattern forming. The same pattern that had driven other Muslim families from Thailand when they became too visible, too outspoken. When Omar returned from prayer, he found his wife clutching the business card the immigration officers had left behind. "They want to see you tomorrow," she whispered. "Omar, what if they send you away? What if they take you from us?" That night, after Zara had gone to bed, Omar and Siraporn sat on their small balcony overlooking the city lights, making the hardest decision of their marriage. "We could leave," Siraporn said quietly. "Go to Malaysia. I have cousins there, we could start over." Omar was quiet for a long time. "And teach Zara that speaking truth means running away when people don't like it? Better than teaching her that speaking truth means destroying your family." They talked until dawn, their voices growing hoarse, their hearts growing heavier. By the time the sun rose over Bangkok's golden temples, they had reached a decision that satisfied neither of them, but seemed like the only path forward. They would stay, they would fight, but they would be more careful. "No more public events," Omar said. "No more debates. We keep our heads down and wait for this to pass." But even as they made these plans, neither of them noticed the small figure standing in the doorway behind them, listening to every word with the intense concentration that had made her famous. Zara had heard everything, and she was already forming plans of her own. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Omar had left early for his appointment with immigration officials, his hands steady despite the fear in his chest. Siraporn was preparing Zara's breakfast when someone knocked at their door. Not the harsh, demanding knock of officials, but the polite, measured knock of someone seeking permission to enter. Through the peephole, Siraporn saw something that made her gasp. Master Thanakit stood outside their door. He was alone, wearing simple gray clothes instead of his ceremonial robes. His famous silver hair was unkempt, his usually perfect posture slightly hunched. He looked, Siraporn thought, like a man who hadn't slept in days. "Mrs. Rahman," he said, when she opened the door, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "I apologize for coming unannounced. I wondered if I might speak with your daughter." Siraporn stared at him, unable to process what she was seeing. Thailand's most revered Buddhist master, standing humbly at her door, asking to speak with the child who had embarrassed him in front of millions. She's eating breakfast," Siraporn managed. "I can wait." And he did wait, sitting quietly in their small living room while Zara finished her meal in the kitchen. When she emerged and saw him, her eyes widened with surprise, but she showed no fear. "Master Thanakit," she said, bowing politely in the Thai manner her mother had taught her. "You honor our home." The master's composure cracked slightly at her formality. "The honor is mine, child. I came to continue our conversation." What followed was the strangest hour of Siraporn's life. She watched her 9-year-old daughter sit cross-legged on the floor across from one of Asia's most powerful spiritual leaders, discussing theology with the casual intensity she usually reserved for her father's lessons. But this wasn't a debate, it was something else entirely. "Your questions the other night," Master Thanakit said, "they have troubled my sleep." "I'm sorry if they caused you pain," Zara replied. "That wasn't my intention." "No, child. You misunderstand. They troubled my sleep because they were the right questions. Questions I should have asked myself decades ago." Zara tilted her head, that same gesture that had captivated millions of viewers. "What do you mean?" Master Thanakit was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on his hands. "I have spent 40 years teaching people to empty themselves of attachment, of desire, of feeling. I thought wisdom meant becoming nothing, but watching you speak that night." He looked up at her with something like wonder. "You were so full of love, full of certainty, full of light, and you were more peaceful than I have ever been in my emptiness." "Peace isn't emptiness," Zara said gently. "Peace is knowing you're loved, knowing you belong somewhere, knowing there's someone who cares about every thought in your heart. And you believe this. Allah cares about your thoughts?" "I don't believe it, Master Thanakit. I know it, the same way you know the sun is warm when it touches your face." The master closed his eyes, and Siraporn saw something she never expected to see. Tears sliding down the cheeks of a man famous for teaching detachment from all emotion. "Child," he whispered, would you teach me about this knowing?" But before Zara could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs outside made all three of them freeze. Omar's voice, tight with controlled panic, called through the door, "Siraporn, let me in, quickly!" When Siraporn opened the door, her husband rushed inside, his face pale, his hands shaking. He stopped short when he saw Master Thanakit sitting on their floor. "What is he doing here?" Omar demanded, his protective instincts flaring. "Baba," Zara said calmly, "Master Thanakit came to learn about Allah." Omar stared at his daughter, then at the master, then back at his daughter. "Zara, we talked about this. No more." "They're going to try to deport me," Omar said, his voice hollow. "The immigration officer told me unofficially. Someone with influence filed a complaint. They're looking for any excuse to revoke my visa." The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. "I filed no complaint," Master Thanakit said quietly, "but I know who did." All eyes turned to him. "My senior disciples, my monastery's board of directors. When the video went viral, they felt my reputation, and by extension their authority, had been challenged. They wanted retribution." Omar's face darkened. "So you came here to gloat? To see the damage your followers caused?" "No," Master Thanakit said, standing slowly. "I came to learn from your daughter. And now..." He straightened, and for a moment, the commanding presence that had made him famous flickered back to life. "Now I think I need to teach my followers a different lesson." He turned to Zara, his expression serious. "Child, you asked me questions that night that I couldn't answer. Now I have a question for you." "Yes, Master. If someone powerful used their influence to hurt innocent people, what would your Allah want you to do about it?" Zara's answer came without hesitation. "Stop them." Master Thanakit smiled, the first genuine smile Siriporn had seen from him. "Then perhaps you could teach me how to do that with mercy." As the master prepared to leave, Zara handed him something that made his eyes widen, a small copy of the Quran, translated into Thai. "For your questions," she said simply. After he left, the Rahman family sat in their living room, trying to process what had just happened. "Do you think he means it?" Siriporn asked. "About helping us?" Omar shook his head. "I don't know, but I don't think we can count on it. We need to prepare for the worst." But Zara, curled up in her mother's lap with the certainty that only children possess, had a different perspective. "He's going to help us, Baba." I could see it in his eyes. Sometimes, people just need to remember who they used to be before they became who they thought they should be. Neither of her parents understood what she meant. They would, soon enough. Part 3. The Master's Choice. Master Thanakit didn't return to his monastery that night. Instead, he sat in his private meditation garden, the small Quran Zara had given him, resting unopened in his lap, while 40 years of certainties crumbled around him like autumn leaves. The garden had always been his sanctuary, a perfectly manicured space where ornate Buddha statues gazed serenely from among lotus ponds and carefully pruned bonsai trees. Tonight, it felt like a museum of someone else's life. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from disciples, reporters, and monastery officials demanding explanations for his inappropriate visit to the Muslim family. He ignored them all. At midnight, his senior disciple, Venerable Sumon, found him there. "Master," Sumon said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "The board is convening an emergency meeting. Your actions today have caused tremendous concern. Visiting that family, legitimizing their disrespect." "Sit down, Sumon," Master Thanakit said quietly, not looking up from the book in his lap. "Master, I don't think you understand the gravity." "Sit down." Something in the master's voice made Sumon obey, though his jaw remained clenched with frustration. "Tell me," Master Thanakit said, finally looking at his disciple. "When did we decide that being questioned was the same as being disrespected? A child embarrassed you in front of millions of people. She made our entire tradition look foolish." "No, Sumon. I made our tradition look foolish. The child simply asked honest questions. Questions that deserved honest answers. Questions I couldn't answer because..." He paused, the weight of realization heavy in his voice. "Because I'm not sure I believe what I've been teaching anymore." Sumon's face went pale. "Master, you can't mean that. You're tired, confused by the controversy. In the morning, I'm going to do something that will either save my soul or destroy my reputation. Possibly both." Master Thanakit stood, the Quran still clutched in his hands. "Cancel tomorrow's teaching session. Cancel all my public appearances for the next week." "And Sumon?" "Yes, Master? If anyone asks where I am, Tell them I'm learning what I should have studied 40 years ago." The next morning, while immigration officials deliberated Omar's fate in a sterile government building across the city, Master Thanakit made a phone call that would change everything. "Director Prasert, this is Master Thanakit. I need to schedule a press conference for this afternoon. Yes, I know it's short notice. No, I can't tell you what it's about over the phone. Just trust me." By 2 p.m., every major news outlet in Thailand had representatives at the monastery. International media, still hungry for follow-up coverage to the viral video, sent correspondents. The monastery's great hall filled with cameras, reporters, and puzzled disciples who had no idea what their master planned to announce. Master Thanakit entered wearing his full ceremonial robes for what he knew would be the last time. He carried no notes, no prepared statements, just the small Quran Zara had given him, held respectfully in both hands. The room fell silent as he approached the microphone. "3 days ago," he began, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect for decades, "a 9-year-old girl asked me questions I couldn't answer. Today, I want to share with you what I've learned in trying to find those answers." He held up the Quran, and a wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the audience. "I have spent the last 2 days reading this book, not to find flaws, not to prepare counter-arguments, but to understand what could give a child such certainty, such peace, such wisdom." Camera flashes exploded. Reporters began typing frantically. In the audience, Venerable Suman looked like he might faint. "What I found challenged everything I thought I knew about spirituality, about truth, about the path to peace. This book speaks of a God who is not distant and detached, but intimately involved in every moment of human experience. It speaks of rules not as chains, but as mercy, of surrender not as defeat, but as the highest form of courage." The room was dead silent now, everyone straining to hear where this was leading. "For 40 years, I have taught that enlightenment comes from emptying oneself of all attachment, all desire, all emotion. I believed that peace lay in becoming nothing. But this child, this remarkable, wise child, showed me something different. She showed me what it looks like to be filled with divine love and to find perfect peace in that fullness." Master Thanakit paused, his eyes finding the cameras that would carry his words across the world. "I want to be clear about what I'm saying. I am not renouncing Buddhism. I am not converting to Islam. I am simply acknowledging that my understanding has been incomplete, and I am asking for the opportunity to learn more." The explosion of noise that followed, shouted questions, arguments between reporters, the sound of disciples leaving in protest, barely registered with Master Thanakit. He had one more thing to say, and it was the most important. "There is another matter," he said, raising his voice above the chaos. "It has come to my attention that some of my followers, acting without my knowledge or approval, have used their influence to cause difficulties for the Rahman family. Let me be absolutely clear. Any harassment of this family ends now. Any official complaints filed against them are hereby withdrawn, and if anyone continues to persecute them in my name, they will answer to me personally." He looked directly into the main television camera. "Omar Rahman is a good man, a devoted father, and a person of faith who has contributed positively to Thai society for 15 years. His daughter is a remarkable child whose wisdom has enriched all of us. They deserve our respect, not our persecution." With that, Master Thanakit walked off the stage, leaving behind a chaos of reporters, outraged disciples, and a news story that would dominate headlines for weeks. But he wasn't thinking about headlines. He was thinking about a promise he'd made to a 9-year-old girl, and a lesson in mercy he still needed to learn. The news reached the Rahman family as Omar sat in the immigration office, waiting to hear whether he would be deported. The television in the waiting room was tuned to the press conference, and every person in the room, officials, applicants, security guards, stopped what they were doing to watch Thailand's most revered spiritual leader defend a Muslim family on live television. Omar's phone buzzed with a text from the immigration officer who had been handling his case. "Your hearing is canceled. All complaints have been withdrawn. Welcome to continue your life in Thailand, Mr. Rahman." When Omar arrived home an hour later, he found his wife and daughter glued to the television, watching news analysis of Master Thanakit's shocking announcement. "He did it," Siraporn whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He actually did it." Zara looked up at her father with eyes that sparkled with joy and something else, a deep satisfaction, as if a prayer had been answered exactly as she'd expected. "I told you he would help us, Baba. I could see the light in him. It just needed permission to shine." Omar collapsed into his chair, overwhelmed by relief, gratitude, and something he couldn't quite name. "What happens now?" he asked. Zara smiled and picked up her Quran from the table beside her. "Now Master Thanakit learns what I've been trying to tell him, that the best rules aren't the ones that control us. They're the ones that free us to love each other better." But across the city, in the monastery that had been his home for 4 decades, Master Thanakit was discovering that choosing truth over tradition came with costs he hadn't anticipated. Half his disciples had already left. The monastery's board of directors was calling for his removal. Death threats were appearing on his social media accounts from extremist groups who saw his respect for Islam as treachery. As night fell over Bangkok, the man who had once commanded the respect of millions sat alone in his meditation garden, reading by lamplight about a God who promised that those who sought truth with sincere hearts would always find their way home. For the first time in his life, he was completely alone. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of that solitude, because he was no longer empty. The question was, what would he do with this new fullness? The answer would come sooner than he expected, and from a direction that would surprise everyone, including himself. Part 4. The Light That Remains. 6 months later, the small mosque in Bangkok's Chinatown had an unusual visitor for Friday prayers. Master Thanakit, though he no longer used that title, knelt beside Zara Rahman on a simple prayer rug, his forehead touching the ground in submission to Allah. The man who had once taught emptiness had found fullness. The teacher who had preached detachment had discovered the peace of complete surrender. His conversion 3 months earlier had sent shockwaves through Southeast Asia's Buddhist community. Some called him a traitor, others a seeker who had finally found his way home. But the man himself seemed untouched by the controversy, radiating a tranquility that his decades of meditation had never achieved. After prayers, he walked with the Rahman family through Bangkok's bustling streets, no longer surrounded by disciples or photographers, just a man learning to see the world through new eyes. "Uncle Hakim," Zara said. She had chosen his new Islamic name herself. "Are you happy you asked those questions?" The former master smiled, his hand resting gently on the child's shoulder. "The happiest I've ever been, little sister. Though I think it was your questions that saved me, not mine." They paused outside a small bookstore, where a display window caught their attention. There, prominently featured, was a new book, The Child Who Spoke Truth, A Journey from Buddhism to Islam by Dr. Hakim Rahman, the name he had taken to honor the family that had shown him the path. "Look," Siraporn said softly, "they translated it into English, Arabic, and Malay too." Omar shook his head in wonder. Who would have thought that one evening's conversation could reach so many hearts? The book had become an international sensation, not just among Muslims, but among seekers of all faiths who resonated with its message of sincere questioning and humble seeking. More importantly, it had sparked a movement of interfaith dialogue based on curiosity rather than confrontation. "Uncle Hakim," Zara said as they continued walking, "my teacher says you've been visiting schools to talk about peace between religions. Is that true?" Hakim nodded. "It is. Though I'm no longer a master of anything, I found I still have something to share. Not about emptiness, but about the fullness that comes from loving Allah and His creation." They had reached the cultural center where it all began. A banner outside announced, "Monthly Interfaith Dialogue. Questions welcome. Judgment left at the door." Strange, Omar mused, how this place looks so different now. It was true. What had once seemed like an imposing fortress of intellectual pride now appeared as simply what it was. A building where people gathered to learn from each other. "Baba," Zara said suddenly, "I want to tell you something." Omar knelt down to his daughter's level, as he always did when she had something important to say. "That night when I asked Master Thanakit those questions, I wasn't trying to win or prove anything. I was just sad that he didn't know how loved he was. By Allah, I mean. I wanted him to know." Hakim's eyes filled with tears. Tears he no longer tried to hide or transcend. "And now I do know, little sister. Every morning when I wake up, every time I read the Quran you gave me, every time I pray, I know." As the sun set over Bangkok's golden spires, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber, the unlikely family made their way home through streets that had once felt hostile but now seemed filled with possibility. The viral video that had started it all was still watched millions of times, but its message had evolved beyond a simple debate victory. It had become a testament to the power of innocent questions, sincere seeking, and the courage to speak truth with love. In schools across Thailand, children learned about Zara Rahman not as the girl who embarrassed a master, but as the child who showed that wisdom has no age limit, and that the greatest victories come not from defeating others, but from helping them find their way to light. And in a small apartment above a halal restaurant in Bangkok's Sukhumvit district, a 9-year-old girl continued her studies, her prayers, and her gentle questioning of the world around her, never knowing that her simple desire to share Allah's love had rippled across continents and touched millions of hearts. But perhaps that was exactly as it should be. After all, the most powerful truths are often spoken by those who don't realize how much power they hold. As Zara fell asleep that night, her Quran resting on the nightstand beside her bed, her last thought was a prayer of gratitude, not for fame or recognition, but for the privilege of being Allah's instrument in helping a lost soul find his way home. And in a small apartment across the city, a former Buddhist master named Hakim opened the same Quran to the verse that had first captured his heart 6 months ago. And it is he who sends down rain from heaven, and we produce thereby the vegetation of every kind. We produce from it greenery from which we produce grains arranged in layers. Creation, he had learned, was not about emptiness. It was about Allah's love manifesting in infinite forms, each one a sign for those who sought to see. He closed the book, faced Mecca, and whispered the evening prayer that had become as natural to him as breathing. Some journeys, he reflected, begin with the courage to ask honest questions. Others begin with the humility to hear honest answers. The best journeys, he had discovered, begin with both.
Enjoying our stories? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content.